Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at round number 5 of the Madrid Chess Festival being held in Spain. Now, thus far, Levy Rosman, the YouTuber, has started off very strongly with 3 points out of 4. He's gaining a bunch of rating points as well as being in contention to make a Grandmaster North. Now, in the 5th round, he's playing against Stanley Lelis Martinez Dueñas from Cuba, and he has the white pieces. So the game starts out with d4 from Levy. We get the move knight to f6, and now we have the move bishop to g5, where Levy plays the classic Trump-Howski opening. After bishop g5, we get the move d5, and now we have this move e3 being played. Here, Martinez plays the move knight bd7, and now we get the move knight d2, and black plays e6. Now, thus far, very, very slow development for both sides, and the game continues with this move bishop to d3. Now, after bishop to d3, we get the move c5, and Levy plays c3. Of course, Levy has created the classic pyramid structure with the pawns from b2 to d4 and f2 to d4 supporting each other, and of course, this bishop is inside the pawn structure. Now, unlike in the London system, white has the bishop on g5. In the London system, you'd normally have this bishops on f4 and d3, but here Levy has the bishop on g5 instead. Game continues with the move queen to b6, and now Levy plays rook to b1, trying to guard the pawn on b2. Here, Martinez plays e5, and already it's very clear that the opening has not gone very well for Levy because black has actually claimed a lot of the center. One thing you'll remember about the London system is that in the London, white normally has his bishop on f4, preventing black from playing e5 or even the knight on f3 to stop it as well. But in this case, after black has to play e5, due to the fact that the bishop is on g5 and the knight is on g1 still and has not been developed to f3, black is doing quite well. So we get knight to e2 being played here, and now we have the move bishop to e7. Levy castles. We get the move castles from Martinez, and now we have this move a3 being played. Now, a3 is not a move that I'm a huge fan of, but Levy is trying to simply create play on the queen side very quickly without committing to a plan in the center. Now, one of the hardest things to do in chess is to maintain the tension. White really wants to trade the pawn on d4 for the pawn on c5 or the pawn on e5, but in this situation, it's very, very difficult to maintain the patience and not do it. But Levy decides he's going to try and hit the pawn structure from the side. So after a3, we get this move rook to e8, and now Levy plays the move b4. After b4 is played, Martinez plays the move c4, and now Levy goes bishop c2, and we have this move h6. Now, you're probably wondering, why didn't Martinez trade in center? Now, the main reason he didn't trade, even though the computer likes this approach, is because after pawn takes pawn, let's just say e4 and bishop c2, now this knight on e2 actually has some great squares on either c3 or f4 to attack the pawn on d5, whereas before, when you look at this position, the knight can't really go anywhere. The pawns are all kind of in the way, and for that reason, white desperately wants to get more space. So we have the move c4. Now we have the move bishop c2, and h6 is played by black. Now the computer actually likes this move e4, completely slamming the door on any central pawn breaks temporarily. But after e4, I suspect the reason that Martinez didn't play this is he was worried about the move f3, because after f3 is played here, let's just say pawn takes pawn, rook takes, suddenly this long diagonal opens up for the bishop, and you worry about knight g3 as well as pawn to e4, and it simply looks very scary to play in this position. So it looks very scary, but the computer actually thinks that after a move like a5 here, white is really a little bit too slow to break open the center. If you play a move like knight to g3, after takes here, black can go h6. Let's say you take and knight takes is played. Now the bishop is coming to this g4 square, and if you play h3 to stop that, black can go rook to a3, infiltrating on the queen side, and white has a lot of problems to deal with. Of course, it's very easy to see that from a distance, and obviously I'm not playing the game, but that would have been the top choice for the computer. Instead, we get the move h6. Levy trades the bishop for the knight, and now we get this move e4. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and knight e5. Now, what's happened here in this position is the center is really clarified a lot. The material remains balanced, but now black has this potential past c pawn, and white has its potential past d pawn, and black is very slightly behind in development with the bishop and the rook simply not being developed, but the position remains balanced. Now here, Levy plays the move knight to e4, and this is a start of going in the wrong direction. Computer thinks that knight takes c4 is probably completely fine for white, because if black takes, you can simply take the horse, not the horse, the bishop back on d4, and if black takes on f2 and then plays knight takes c4, after queen to d3, white has this really nice double A battery aiming towards the black king on g8. Now Levy ultimately decides not to play that. I'm not sure why he didn't play it, probably calculating a lot of lines. Another line you could look at is also h3 here to stop either bishop g4 or knight g4, but ultimately he goes for this move knight e4. Now this move is not the best move in the position, but I think from a practical standpoint, or maybe more like accidental luck, Levy gets very fortunate because when he plays this move, the line for black to be much better here is very computerish and not realistic for a human to find, and we'll see why. So bishop g4 is played. Levy goes rook to e1, guarding the knight. If he were to take the bishop here after takes, rook e1 and bishop d3, black is actually much better because the pawn in a3 is weak. You have this passed c pawn, and you have a lot of pressure here in the center of the board, and white simply is much worse. So Levy goes rook to e1, and the reason I sort of start to refer to accidental luck or more accidental luck than anything is that black is actually winning here according to the computer if you find one move, but there is only one move in the position that is actually winning here for black. If you do not find this move, white is completely fine. Now in this position, the winning move for black is this very unusual move, queen to g6. Now the reason this move is so strong is that you're probably going to wait, you hang the bishop, but if white takes the bishop on d4 after bishop takes e2 and you take back, there's knight to f3, forking the king and the queen, and black wins the game. And in this position, if you play a move like king to h1, for example, again knight f3 wins the game. So if you take, it's checkmate, spaghetti-o time. And if you move the queen, I simply take the rook. Now very easy to see from a distance obviously why this is good, but you have to realize there's a second reason that I don't think anybody would play this. And the second reason I don't think that anybody would play this is because in this position you're walking into all kinds of threats on this long diagonal with light square b. So you're worried about all kinds of fossils, some kind of trick, and your bishop on d4 is hanging. Now to be clear, this is -2 on a stronger engine. It is completely winning, but it's very difficult to find, and if you don't spend a lot of time, I think there's almost no chance anybody would find that, including myself or Magnus Carlsen. So here we get knight to d3 instead. Takes, black sacks the rook with rook takes knight, takes, king h1 takes, and now Levy correctly takes the bishop on g4. Now white could capture this bishop on e1, but after bishop to d7, black can bring the rook to the open lane, and more importantly, this light square b stops this d pawn from marching up the board. So Levy plays queen takes g4, and now we get the move queen to f2. This started going in the wrong direction, by the way. In this position, what black should have played was the move bishop to d2, trying to go bishop g5 and cover this d8 square with the bishop and the rook. So we get queen to f2. After queen to f2 is played, we get the move rook to d1, and now we have the move rook to e8, and Levy plays knight g1. Very logical move, avoiding the knight being captured, but also stopping any ideas where black can get the classic back rank checkmate. So after knight to g1, we get the move rook to d8, and this is sort of the start of going in the wrong direction here. Again, the computer wants us to move queen c2, and I think after d6 the idea is to go bishop f2, if I remember. I think it's to go bishop f2 and then put the bishop on b6 to guard the rook, which is currently in front of the pass pawn on d7. Again, not easy to see, but that's how it goes. So in this position, after knight to g1 is played, we get this move rook to d8 being played by Martinez, and here Levy plays the move d6. Now when Levy plays this move d6, this is not the best move according to the computer. It actually prefers queen c4 here with the idea of going knight to f3 or playing d6 in conjunction with queen c4, but I really like the move d6 from Levy here because it's following the basics. Now one of the things you want to think about very frequently when you're playing chess is what are the concepts. Now when Levy puts the rook on d1 all the way back here, the rook is behind this pass pawn, and in general if you have a rook behind a pass pawn, you want to push the pawn forward. So we get this position after d6, and now we have bishop c3 being played in this position, and Levy goes queen to e4. Now this is a mistake. Computer actually thinks that white, I believe, is still a little bit better after queen to c4, but the game goes on with queen e4. Here we have queen to b6 being played, and black is now trying to win this pawn on d6 with the classic right triangle. Levy plays d7, and now Martinez, after defending quite well over the last 5 to 6 moves, inexplicably throws everything straight down the toilet with this move bishop to f6. Now in this position, the correct move for black to play here is the move queen to c3, or queen to c6 I should say. The reason this move is the correct move is that if white plays queen to e7 attacking the rook, you have bishop to f6 and the bishop guards the rook on d8, and white cannot play this move queen to e8 here instead of queen e7, because if white goes queen e8, you take the queen, takes, and black simply has a queen for a rook and wins the game. So if black goes queen c6, probably the best that white can do here is to probably trade the queens and play something like knight f3, and after king f8, let's just say rook d6, bishop f6, takes and h3. The game will almost certainly end in a draw because both sides have the same amount of material. So after d7 in this position, we get this move bishop to f6 being played by Martinez, trying to guard the rook on d8. Now on first glance, you're probably thinking that in this position black should be completely fine, but what Martinez overlooks completely is that after this move queen d8, he probably thinks, well, hey, I just moved my king to h7 and I'm completely fine, right? Except for the fact that after queen e8 king h7, now white can take the pawn, and not only is white up a pawn on d7 here, but it's a pass pawn as well, which is one square from queening at the end of the board. So after queen takes f7, Levy is now up a pawn and he is in great shape to potentially win the game. So here we get the move queen to c6 being played by Martinez, and now Levy plays the move queen h5. Now queen h5 is actually a slight mistake here. It's not the best move according to the computer. Computer actually prefer that white immediately plays knight to f3 followed by h3, creating the classic luft for the king so that there are no ice skaters in the position. So here Levy plays queen to h5 instead, and Levy's idea here quite simply is that if black takes what looks like a free pawn on d7 here, you can now go queen to f5, checking the king and attacking the rook at the same time, and at this point white will win the game. So we get this move queen to e4 instead. Now one thing I was saying during my live stream on my kick broadcast while the game was going on is that at this point it's very hard mentally to shift from trying to play the best move or looking for the best move, because you're already in a negative feedback loop. When you play this position, when you blunder this pawn at f7, immediately what goes through your mind is that you know you've blundered, you've made a mistake here. So because you know that you've made a mistake, you stop thinking about things in the same way. You start second guessing yourself, you start hesitating, you start worrying about all these different little things, and it becomes a situation where it's very hard to maintain your composure. So after queen to h5 is played in this position, what Martinez should play here is this move g6, and amazingly after g6 here, black is actually only very slightly worse. The reason black is only very slightly worse is that white no longer can move the queen to, I don't know, a5, because after rook takes d7, you don't have the queen f5 check to win the rook on d7 here, so you have to move the queen back to a square like h3. Now after you move the queen to h3 here, black can now play the move king to g7, and the big issue for white is that you cannot push this pawn to h3 anymore. And furthermore, when you play a move like knight to f3 now after queen c2, you struggle here because without this pawn on h3, just to illustrate the point, say you could get something like this, for example, white can simply move the rook forward to d6 and be much better because you can escape with the king. But the queen being stuck on h3 in this position, right back here, it's very hard to move the rook up the board because your king is always a little bit iffy on the g1 square. So in this position, after queen to h5, we now get the move queen e4 instead. Levy plays queen to c5, and we have this move a6. Levy goes queen to c7 here, and we get this move b5. Now b5 is a big mistake also, but I suspect that Levy's opponent at this point was mentally sort of just gone here. I think his opponent probably just thought he was losing and wasn't super sharp or focused. Now that is one thing that I will say that Magnus Carlsen, the former world champion, is extremely good at. Is he's really good when he gets worse positions or losing positions even at finding the best moves and keeping that equilibrium where he doesn't lose control and just become negative and lose the game very quickly. But Martinez here plays b5, and this move is a massive mistake, as we'll see shortly, because what it does is it fixes the pawns on the queen side, but it also is going to open up a couple of very critical squares for the knight on the c5 and a5 squares. Now the reason I bring that up is after, as we'll see in the game, after b5 knight f3, we get this move queen c4, queen d6, queen b3, and now Levy plays the move queen to d3. Now queen to d3 is actually a winning trade here for white, and the reason is because in this position after king g8, knight d2, king f7, and knight b3, this knight is going to either the a5 or the c5 squares. Now there is an old maxim in chess which goes along the lines of be careful when you push pawns forward because they can never move backwards. Now if we compare this with a position, let's just say back here, I'm just going to set this up somehow, some position like this, for example, black is actually completely fine in this position. Actually, let me put the knight on b3 to illustrate why. Where because this pawn is not on b5, if black goes king e7, knight c5, you always have b6 to kick the knight out of the square. Whereas in the position in the game, when we get here after knight d2 and knight b3, black's pawn is on b5 versus b7, so because the pawn can't go backwards, white is technically winning. So the game continues with the move bishop to e7, and after bishop to e7, Levy plays knight c5, trying to put the knight on b7, and here Martinez trades the bishop for the knight. We get king to e7, c6, and now we have the move rook to f8. Now after rook to f8 is played here, what Martinez is hoping for is that Levy is going to make a beginner mistake, push the pawn to c7, try to get a queen at the end of the board, and blunder the move rook to f1, which would lead to the classic ice skater checkmate. Of course Levy doesn't play that move. After rook to f8, we get this move. I believe rook to e3 is played. One second, I have to make sure I have the correct sequences. After rook to f8, let me double check this very quickly, since I don't actually have the correct moves played. King g1 is played. In this position, we get the move king to d8, and now we have rook to e3. a5 is played, and here Levy plays the move rook to e5, attacking the pawns on a5 and b5. Now the big issue for black here is that black would love to go king c7, going after the pawn on c6, but here white can play the move rook to e8, and the pawns support each other. This pawn on d7 supports the rook, and white will either win the rook or get a new queen, and the game is all over. So we get the move a5. Here Levy plays rook to e5, and black cannot move the king or the rook here. If you move the rook, same problem. White gets a queen and wins the game. And in this position, we get this move. After rook to e5, we get this move b4. Here Levy gobbles a pawn. We get the move king c7, and now Levy plays the move pawn takes pawn on b4. After pawn takes pawn on b4, we get the move king takes c6, and after king takes c6, Levy plays the correct move rook to f5. Now white has many ways to win here, but rook f5 is a really nice touch, not only because white sacks the rook, but also because now black has to move the rook away from the open file. And after we get to move rook b8, Levy plays rook f7, guarding the pawn on d7 and attacking the pawn on the g7 at the same time. Now at this point, of course, Martinez could resign, but he plays a couple more moves. We get king c7 here, allowing Levy to promote the pawn to a queen, and now Martinez resigns the game because after king takes queen, check, king c7, white swaps, and unfortunately for black, white can distract the black king with his outside b pawn. So if you go here, eventually I keep distracting you, and now I run the king over. I gobble all these pawns on the king side, I push p, and I win the game by creating a first or a second queen. So huge win for Levy in round number 5. He now moves, I believe, to 4 points out of 5. And Norm is now within striking distance. He will need 2.5 points out of 4. Now he still has a lot of strong players ahead of him in the coming days, but he is doing very, very well, and at the very least he is inspiring a lot of people to try and come out of retirement and compete once again. So a huge win for Levy. We'll see if he can actually get the norm. At the very least, he's probably going to gain like 30 or 40 points, even if the rest of the tournament goes very poorly, but it is great to see. So on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the 5th round of the Madrid Chess Festival in Spain. I'm going to continue doing recaps of these games probably for the next day or two, at least as long as I can. I might not be able to do the last couple of rounds because I have to travel, but I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and we're going to see if Levy can finish the job and make a norm in this tournament. So once again, hope you guys enjoyed the recap. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we will be back soon with some more great recaps from Madrid. See you guys. Have a good one. Bye.